I'm really delighted to have Mr. Pravet Agarwal on board, Head of Unit for E-commerce and Platforms at DG Connect for the European Commission. Next, we have Marco Benzini, the Director of Public Policy at YouTube and also for a member of EuroISPA. And of course, Ms. Helen Houdaray, Deputy Director of the Digital Economy Department for the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Policy in the Netherlands. Before we open the panel, we'll now listen to short introductory remarks by our very own Malcolm Hutty, Chair of EuroISPA Intermediary Liability Committee and Head of Public Affairs and Executive Director at the London Internet Exchange Links. So Malcolm, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alexandra, and welcome everybody to this second workshop. Links is very pleased to sponsor these workshops by EuroISPA, which we think gives a great opportunity for specialists who really know the proposal well to be able to get right down into the nitty-gritty rather than only talking about the overall parameters and the overall design of the proposal as a single, more generalized workshop might do. These really give the opportunity to challenge and potentially maybe even improve the drafting that was originally brought forward, rather supporting the policy, but in a way that potentially leads to improvements, rather than discussing merely the only overall framework. I don't want to take up everyone's time with my own thoughts here. I'd really like to hear what our invited specialists have to say, but I will take the opportunity to just maybe throw out some challenge questions that I'd be interested to listen to in the areas that have been scheduled for today. So in the know your business customer area, to start off with, that seems to me that there is a balance being struck here between privacy of internet users to remain anonymous versus the need to identify them when they're engaging in online marketplaces. And certainly I have heard the consumer protection argument raised a lot for why online marketplaces it's appropriate that the traders in those marketplaces should be clearly identified so that consumers can be properly protected. What I'd like to know is, do the panelists think that the Commissioner struck the right balance there in limiting this to online marketplaces? And if so, the definition of trader that's been used includes not only those that are selling items on online marketplaces, but it would also include those that are buying things. Is that right, or is that an oversight from the Commission, or potentially an overreach? In the trusted flaggers area, EuroISPA produced a report some years ago that looked into how trusted flaggers work in practice with the major operators, and found that they really depended on the operators having control themselves over who should be a trusted flagger. Does the concept of trusted flagger really lose its value if the right to decide who is trusted is taken away from the operator? And does that really then become really a sort of delegated regulator rather than a real trusted flagger? For codes of conduct, EuroISPA generally welcomes the idea of codes of conduct that are operated on a voluntary basis, but there is a balance to be struck here between when the code of conduct can actually allow companies to go further than the law would otherwise reasonably allow, leading to better outcomes, but potentially, on the other hand, if it goes too far, can become a sort of end run around the sort of democratic scrutiny, and potentially code of conduct could even ultimately create risks to third parties who haven't been involved in the creation of that code of conduct, whether they're commercial operators or indeed citizens and business users. Does the do the speakers think that the balance has been struck right there? And if not, how would you improve that for greater certainty and flexibility at the same time? And finally, in the risk mitigation area, for the very large online platforms, there seem to be that is very open-ended. The idea of the very large online platform and the regulator getting together to identify new kinds of risks and then to identify what needs to be done about it. Is this just a bit too open? Is this trespassing on the prerogative of the legislator to actually decide what's wrong and what should be done about things? Or is it right that the regulator and the very large platforms should really be setting a new form of regulatory structure themselves through such open-ended authorization? I'd be very interested in the speakers' views. I hope that's given some ideas of some of the questions that we're looking at. And back to you, Alexandra.
Thank you so much, Malcolm. Also, I'm sure that we'll have enough time to answer all of these questions, but maybe going back on your first item on the Know Your Business Customer topic, I was wondering maybe, Prabhat, you can go a bit more into detail into Article 22 and its purpose and how you came to draft it in such a way.
Yes, thank you, Malcolm. Thank you, Alexa. It's a pleasure to be here. And also with Helene and Marco, and I can see from the chat many colleagues, and so I can see that we're going right down to detail. But and I'm happy to answer the questions that you and that Malcolm also raised for discussion. Although I think that maybe it's more interesting that we also hear from others, not just for the Commission, because of course you won't be surprised to hear me say that that the Commission proposal strikes the right balance in many ways here. But now, just maybe if I just make two, if you allow me, 2 or 3 high-level points before we then zoom in on the overall architecture and then on the specific questions. So just to avoid that we miss seeing the forest for the trees here, because we're going right down to a level of details, and I think it's important to just recall some of the big picture elements that we have here. Since I have been working on the area of regulation of intermediaries, and some of you I know have worked with it longer than I have, but and basically in the past discussions have been twofold. Either the discussions have focused on the safe harbor privileges of the e-commerce directive or equivalent or similar privileges in other pieces of law around the world, notably Section 230 in the United States or other types of legal constructs which are quite common, not only in domestic law but also in multilateral or in free trade agreements. So either they have focused on whether these immunities are appropriate, or are they too broad or too narrow, or in need of updating, or the discussion has focused very much on individual content removal questions. So this has been very much the logic of the German NetzDG, which contains a removal obligation. It was also very much at the focus of the French proposal known as the Avia law, and in some extent it has also made itself into EU law in the form of the recently adopted terrorist content regulation. So I hope I'm not oversimplifying, but the discussion when it comes to illegal content and platform responsibility has in the past really focused on either the liability exemptions or the safe harbor privileges, or on the other hand, kind of the removal obligations for individual items of context. Now, the reason why in the DSA we went beyond those two things was that having worked in this area and studied it for a long time, we actually felt that neither of these questions exhaustively answers the real issues that we observe. And in fact, that there are many other issues which are not related to either the safe harbor or to individual content removals or delistings. But we wanted to address in the Digital Services Act a much broader spectrum of issues in a comprehensive manner. And this is why we have this catalog of due diligence obligations. And this kind of stitches together some of the questions that you have here. Is that we have also looked at basically traceability obligations. So this is the Know Your Business Customer obligation, Article 22, on which you asked. We've also focused on, of course, a very extensive catalog of transparency obligations, which is a kind of one of the areas where there's a strong consensus about, the need for greater transparency. And in some cases, including in Article 22, we have introduced some display obligations. So this is kind of basically we're regulating how certain pieces of content should be displayed towards the consumer, or information should be made available in some way. And in others, and this is notably the question on the risk assessment, we wanted to move away from issues of individual content, we wanted to look more at how systems are regulated, and where, Malcolm, you have asked the question whether this is overly broad, is it sufficiently precise, does the regulator actually have the capability of regulating it in such a broad generic manner. So, and just to give you this logic, so we wanted to move way beyond maybe the simplistic dichotomy, perhaps, between removal obligations on the one hand and safe harbor privileges on the other hand, and take a much more holistic view. Now, in this piece of context, and I kind of won't mention here also the sister proposal, the Digital Markets Act, which goes along, and I think that this these two things need to be looked at together. But let's focus here on the specific questions that you have. Now, to your question, Alexandra, and also to Malcolm, what was the logic behind the Know Your Business Customer? Well, first of all, there is a fair amount of evidence that is specifically linked to marketplace behavior, where non-compliant goods were entering the internal market, or are entering the internal market via marketplaces, but from sellers whose identity cannot be ascertained in any case. Neither are they known to the buyer frequently, nor are they actually traceable in case of some non-compliant goods being offered on third-party sellers. So, and it was frequently found that some of these sellers were established outside of the union as well. So there was a particular logic here, and this was really the experience that underpinned Article 22. And you can try it yourself. If you have an Instagram account, it doesn't take much scrolling. And if you buy something, actually, it's very hard, if not impossible, to know whether a seller on I bought some clothes, not what I'm wearing now, but on Instagram, just to try it out. It's worth trying it out. And actually, it's not possible to even determine whether the seller that you're buying from is located within the union or outside of the union. Just to give you one example, I think things are changing now. Things are evolving, but this is a kind of really practical example, and this has consequences that are detrimental for consumers. I mean, on the one hand, you don't know simple things. Are you going to pay an import duty? How long is it going to take to come? Similar problems have recently actually been encountered also with buyers buying from the United Kingdom, of course, post-Brexit. That's one simple thing. But the second thing is that frequently those, if you look at the SafetyGate notifications and the RAPEX system, you see that a large fraction of non-compliant goods or dangerous goods actually originate from outside the European Union. So that was also part of the reason why this obligation is designed. And so that's a little bit the logic of Article 22 and the Know Your Business Customer, with a specific concern that we had in the context of marketplaces. So I have to say we're encouraged at the moment by the warm initial reception of this. I mean, of course, people are asking for fine tunings and changes and more explanations. But I think it's relatively straightforward article. First of all, the platform has an obligation to collect and display certain categories of information that identify the trader. Then there is also an obligation which we introduced to make sure that the interfaces are designed in such a way that this information can actually be displayed. This is also born out of feedback we've got from sellers that oftentimes that there's no kind of field explained. And Article 22 finally should also be read across with the one small change we made to the liability safe harbor, which is Article 5, paragraph 3, which clarifies, I mean, based on existing case law, that that when it is unclear to the end customer whether or not the platform is offering the products as its own products or whether it's acting as an intermediary, then the safe harbor privileges are not available. This is not necessarily new. There's EU case law on this as well, and there's also national case law specifically in Germany, where many rulings along these lines have been found by courts as well. So that's a little bit maybe just a kickoff for the discussion. I'm sorry if I've been a bit long, but I think it was important just to zoom out briefly before we go down to the nitty-gritty of definitions and recitals and individual paragraphs, which I'm happy to discuss, of course, as well.
Thank you so much. I was wondering if maybe Helen, you would like to share your position on this topic, please.
Yes, Alexandra, thank you very much. First of all, of course, I want to thank you giving me the opportunity to speak on this vital subject, and we're always happy to share our thoughts and shed some light on the current state of affairs in the Council. As you can understand, of course, we're in a preliminary stage of the discussions in the Council. So sometimes to get more on detail, of course, I will try to, but I will, in the first place, put our position, the Dutch position, more generally. Well, before I elaborate on the Know Your Business Customer obligation, I would like to say once again, I think it has been already known, that we really appreciate the proposal that's on the table now. Well, let me congratulate Pravat and his team for delivering this ambitious and well-balanced proposal for the DSA, because it's, I mean, we have to make regulation in a very difficult circumstances, and also it's a vital one, so we have to do it in a well-balanced way. So careful thoughts and considerations for preparing this proposal were very important, and still very important, and also an important task for us as a council as well. And we're very pleased with the overall structure and design of the proposal. More specifically, we're pleased to see the main principles of the e-commerce directive have been maintained, and in combination with transparency obligations. For example, we attach great importance to the limited liability and the country of origin principle remaining in the proposal. And turning to the Know Your Business Customer obligation, because that's a really vital part of the proposal. We welcome the fact that online platforms are to vet their traders prior to allowing them to sell their products and services on their platforms. Illegal traders are fraudulent business customers. They cannot and do not operate in a vacuum online. So just like well-intentioned traders, they rely on mainstream online platforms to operate. And in that case, these mainstream platforms, they generate income from fraudulent business customers whose true identity can currently be difficult or even impossible to verify. Prabhat already referred to that. And the problem with rogue traders is not only limited to illegal activities, it extends to the sale of counterfeit products, violations of consumer protection laws, for example. So the Know Your Business Customer obligation in the DSA introduces reasonable effort requirements on the mainstream platforms to weed out those rogue traders from the legitimate ones. And moreover, also the obligation also ensures that the contact details of traders are available to the platform and by extension to the competent authorities. And we think this is helpful for enforcement purposes. Taking all together, these measures are a step in the right direction towards stemming the dissemination of illegal and unsafe products online and creating a safer online environment for consumers. And that's also, of course, in the digital world, that's one of the most, I think the most important thing is having the confidence of users on the platforms. For example, the Know Your Customer obligation also provides increased transparency for consumers in terms of the information feeds and types of advertisements they're shown online. So this is all very important to get a further uptake of e-commerce, because it comes with the confidence customers have in these platforms, in these services. And for that, we're really welcoming this Article 22. It's a well-balanced proposal in this respect. I don't know if I continue with the trusted flaggers or if we go item by item. I look at Alexandra.
Well, quite frankly, going to the trusted flaggers, I was thinking that maybe Marco could introduce us to their own trusted flagger program. And then we could gather yours and Prabhat's reaction, since YouTube has been, on the forefront of setting up this kind of program. I thought that I could give Marco the floor on that one, if you may.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. Thank you for having us today, and it's always a pleasure to be in conversation with Malcolm, Prabhat, and Hélène. It's a great opportunity actually to really take a step back and discuss with this multi-stakeholder approach how DSA, how we are developing our thinking around DSA, and with already like an eye on possible compliance with some of these rules. So in talking about the trusted flagger, first I want to acknowledge that we were extremely pleased of the way the Commission approached to the whole topic of the DSA, which was by listening from us, from trusted flaggers, from different platforms as well, the way we are dealing with important issues like, for example, moderating content on our platform. So I'm sure that the things I will say are things that are very clear to Prabhat, who had the pleasure and the attention of listening from us, from our trusted flaggers, the way our collaboration work. But to take a step back, the Trusted Flaggers program was created in order to put in a framework the collaboration that should exist, and we are very happy that is existing between online platforms and experts in a given sector, on a given issue, in order to make sure that whenever platforms are receiving notices or requests of removal from these experts these referrals are taken in due account with the right level of priorities. Here, I would like to stress two elements. First, the element of expertise that is required from trusted flaggers to not just to have the possibility to receive this quality of being trusted flaggers, but especially to start this conversation and collaboration with us. We are looking always looking into ways where we can, by working with human experts and on a given issue, learn more from them on how to deal with a problem that could happen on our platform. So this first element of exchanging information, learning from each other, especially on our side, learning from experts on a specific problem, is for us the most important element in the Trusted Flagger program. On top of that, we create a channel of communication. As I said, we give to these trusted flaggers the possibility to send us notices through a specific tool. And these notices are looked by our trust and safety team with the right level of priority. This is happening in a context of first from us in a very proactive way to make sure that the trusted flaggers knows the way platform works, both in terms of policies and in terms of the tools that we are offering. And on the other side, with the goal of keeping an keeping a channel of communication open to receive feedback, to receive requests and questions, and so on and so forth. One example of effective use of Trusted Flagger is, for example, the Code of Conduct to Fight Illegal Hate Speech that we signed a few years ago with the European Commission. And in relation to the code, we took some specific obligation reviewing the majority of, for example, of illegal hate speech in 24 hours. And the Commission is leveraging the collaboration with some NGOs that are also trusted flaggers to receive from them notices and feedback and actually audit in every year the way we are as a platform complying with the obligations of the Code of Conduct. That's I think is an example also to give some transparency on the experts that are working with us. When we talk about experts, we're talking about experts from all over Europe, of course, from all over the world, but for the sake of the discussion that we're having today, I'm very happy to stress about the European footprint of the Trusted Flagger program, and also different issues. We have Trusted Flagger that are helping us on issues like hate speech, on issues that have scientific value. COVID-19 is another example, on issues like misinformation and disinformation. So here, once again, the goal is to leverage positive exchange and collaboration with the civil society groups, with experts, and improve the quality of our content moderation activities. Something that I would like to mention, which I think is very important, the information that we are receiving from trusted flaggers in terms of flagging activity are also very important for informing the effectiveness of our machine learning tool. Our machine learning tool are also learning from the high quality referrals that are coming from trusted flaggers, and in a certain sense, it's really showing the virtuous circle of the content moderation, where the best of the flagging activities that is coming from experts in our community is helping our machines to find infringing content on our platform at scale with as less possible views as possible and in the most effective way.
Thank you so much, Marco. And so now, Helen, I give the floor back to you so that you can tell us a bit more about the Dutch position on this kind of scheme. Thank you.
Well, I think I want to tell more in general how we look at the trusted flagger mechanism in Article 19 of the DSA. We think it's a welcome addition to speeding up the removal of illegal content online and contributed to the safer online environment. At the same time, however, there must be robust safeguards in place to ensure such mechanisms are not abused. And depending on the types of illegal content, abuse of the mechanisms can have different detrimental effects. For example, with speech-related content, abuse of the mechanism could have serious ramifications for fundamental rights, such as freedom of speech online. And to us, fundamental rights, such as the right to privacy and freedom of expression online, are crucial guiding principles in assessing each provision on its merits. This specific provision actually is subject to ongoing discussions in the Netherlands still. We're looking at it from all different kind of angles and have also dialogues with external stakeholders to further inform ourselves and help our position. But these are our, let's say, our main position is this, and we're actually really very curious on how different stakeholders look at this.
Thank you. When reading the Commission's proposal, I was a bit wondering, Prabhat, if you could maybe tell us a bit more on why you made the choice of going for a regulatory approach rather than other options that were on the table, such as, for instance, a co or self-regulatory approach. So maybe you can tell us a bit more about the rationale behind this choice.
Thank you, Alexandra. Well, I mean, there are a couple of answers here. First, one answer is that I think that in some areas we've come to some kind of limit on the self-regulatory approach. I mean, the self-regulatory approach is great, a flexible way of addressing emerging phenomena quickly. By sitting around the table with and indeed, Marco mentioned the hate speech code of conduct, and also some others, disinformation code of practice that has been put together. I mean, there are other examples, memorandum of understanding for counterfeit goods, the product safety pledge. I mean, there are a variety, and also, of course, the voluntary cooperation. Speaking about trusted flaggers with the hotlines that signal child sexual abuse material. The InHope network, which is also a network which is being funded by the European Commission. Just to give some examples of what we consider successful self-regulatory initiatives. But self-regulation has some inherent limitations. I mean, first of all, there's a free riding problem. I mean, those companies that don't participate. I mean, we cannot force anyone to participate in these codes. Being voluntary in nature. I mean, they are not subject then to certain obligations. Non-compliance with the targets doesn't really result in any consequences. I mean, this is all part of the voluntary nature, which we continue to think is a very important tool. So we maintained codes of conduct as a kind of co-regulatory element in the Digital Services Act, and this is not a revolution, I have to say. I mean, this was already the case in the e-commerce directive. It was the case in it is the case in the audiovisual media services directive. It's also included in the copyright directive and in other parts of law. I think what we have done is that we have elevated some of the elements that worked well in the self-regulatory approach and made them binding, because we feel after the experience, first of all, that these systems work. These are effective. I mean, the trusted flagger mechanism is one which is really common to all of these codes of practice, and it results in a faster removal and more efficient. It lowers the burden on the platforms. it frames the cooperation. But we also know that there are some certain limits. I mean, and this is why we have specified the obligations in law, and basically, if you like, moved the co and self-regulatory part to the next frontier. So the parts that work well have become binding. That's one reason. So code of conducts work well. They have informed some of the regulatory obligations on notice and action, on trusted flaggers, on transparency, on so on. We maintain the possibility of having codes of conducts also in the DSA as part of what you like sometimes is a co-regulatory framework. So within that, the board and the commission, they have special roles, for example, on checking objectives of the codes of practice. It can be participation in a code of practice can be used as a risk mitigation factor. It is outright refusal to participate in a code of practice is an element that will be taken into account as part of the enforcement element. So we try to upgrade that system a little bit. Then there's a second important reason is that one of the real objectives of the Digital Services Act, and it's also very explicit both in the Act itself, but also in the accompanying impact assessment, is to harmonize rules that have emerged across the EU, notably in Germany. I mentioned the French proposal, Austria, Denmark. We hear from many member states that they are interested in such binding rules, and some of them have already gained experience. And so, of course, we have on the treaty basis of the internal market the possibilities to approximate and harmonize such rules, and this is exactly what the Digital Services Act is proposing, and particularly with an eye to the cross-border nature of these services. The internet, thank God, doesn't stop at any frontier, but the problems also don't stop at any frontier. So we need an effective mechanism as well, and relying exclusively on self and co-regulation actually does not do justice to this challenge. Is to have a common regulatory framework at union level that gives member states a voice and that provides effective accountability and transparency framework for platforms. That's really those are the two main reasons. I mean, there are many other reasons as well, but I think we also use the opportunity to clarify the cooperation between member states. This is less to do with online platforms as well, but this is something that where we have seen the existing legal framework doesn't provide sufficient rules to really cooperate with time limits across borders on issues which have to do with listings on a social media platform or in a marketplace. And this we felt was really a handicap, and that was contributing to the desire of member states to regulate these issues in their own member states, fragmenting the internal market. So these are some of the reasons. I can go on, but just as a simple as a starting point, I think these are some of the main reasons. I just want to stress finally that we continue to think that co and self-regulations continue to play an important role. This is not necessarily the end of it. I mean, in areas such as disinformation, codes of practices are better used. I mean, are more useful than removal obligations, for example, because I mean this is not necessarily illegal content. Freedom of expression is a very important parameter here that needs to be absolutely safeguarded and protected. And there are many other areas as well where the DSA provides an overarching framework. I'm also thinking on an area where we have a specific thought on online advertising. So many actors are involved, advertising exchanges, advertising agencies and so on, which go beyond the obligations on online platforms as well. I mean, those are well addressed through bringing the right people around the table and saying these things don't work very well. How can we improve them? And that's also why we have a specific code of conduct on advertising foreseen in the Digital Services Act.
Thank you. Marco, as a signatory yourself of many of code of conducts, could you please tell us a bit more about your experience and specifically what could be improved in these codes? Thanks.
I would like really to echo most the things that Prabhat said, I think the power of co and self-regulation is that it's bringing people together to solve a specific problem. And actually, we usually, when we commit in this kind of conversations and engagement, we can do things in a very fast way, quickly and effectively. I'm sure that you are all aware of the concern that are coming from the Parliament on, for example, the approach of the Code of Practice to fight against misinformation. But we need to remind ourselves that we signed this code a few months before the European elections, when there were serious concerns in relation to the democratic process. And thanks to the initiatives that we put forward ahead of the elections and the reporting, in full transparency of the initiatives that we were taking, we were able basically on monthly first and then on weekly basis to inform the public through the Commission of how the democratic process and debate was developing on online platforms. So here you have an evidence of an initiative that was taken, and actually of the positive result of the initiative in practice, because the parliament that was elected thanks to a democratic process that happened, of course, with a very robust debate across Europe, in every square of our continent, but also on traditional media and online media as well, in the same robust and correct way. So that, I would say that something that we need always to be mindful about the co-regulatory or self-regulatory approach is that this should not become a way to put additional pressure on online platforms to regulate content that is not illegal, in some cases not harmful, and therefore should not become a substitution of the role of governments and democratic elected institution, to make a final decision on what should be considered illegal, what should not considered acceptable in our public discourse, online and offline. I stress online and offline because most of the times we see issues like misinformation being happening, of course, online, but also offline. So that said, also in relation to how this is treated in the DSA, we hope that we are all on the same page in saying that these initiatives should not become a different way to put pressure on online platform to tackle speech issues. We believe that there are better ways to do that. Of course, once again, the role of governments in deciding what should be acceptable, what should not be acceptable. And second, if we really want to look into co and self-regulation, very, very important to have a shared definition of what is the problem that we want to solve, and then discuss together the different solution, of course, measuring impact, but making sure that we first have a clear and shared vision on the problem that we want to solve before we just scramble into initiatives that could have indeed impact on the ability of users to exercise fundamental rights.
Thank you. I was wondering, Helen, if you had specific views from a more domestic perspective on codes of conduct.
Yes, a general observation. Of course, the online environment, and Marco already has put it really clearly. I mean, it's subject to continuous change, and it brings a lot of new innovative services and opportunities, and in the same time, it brings also risk that we cannot currently foresee. I mean, that's a part of the digital world. Online platforms are increasingly aware of some of the negative effects their services bring, and they recognize the role they have to play in addressing these issues. And then linking back to the codes of conduct, yeah, we believe also on the basis of national experience that such tools to be instrumental in addressing new risks in a timely and flexible manner. And of course, these codes should not be without some form of mandatory follow-up and supervision on the commitments that are made. And therefore, I mean, we believe that the DSA can provide such a framework. Yeah.
Thank you. We will now move to the last item on the all the measures going beyond content removal, which is VLOPs and the risk mitigation. So I was wondering, Pravat, maybe if you could tell us your position on that part.
Yes, thanks, Alexandra. So I think this section was one of the perhaps more innovative parts of the Digital Services Act, and I don't think that it exists in this form in the digital space anywhere. But it is not entirely new in the world of regulation. I mean, there are analogies in the banking sector, notably, where risk regulation is relatively well established in certain parts. But the concept of risk-based regulation has been discussed in many areas, also in the digital space for a long time, in many ideas. And the point is to put the regulatory burden there where the risks are greatest, and avoid any regulatory burden on those where the risks may be manageable or negligible, in order to stay proportionate to the aims that we have. And so one size doesn't fit all. So that's the first thing. So we focused in this section on, as you say, the VLOPs, the very large online platforms, those that reach more than 10% of users in the European Union. We picked a very simple threshold in the Digital Markets Act. We have more complex criteria because there are other factors at play when we designate things such as gatekeepers and so on. Here we wanted to keep it very simple, and the logic, really, honestly, is also not rocket science in a way. I mean, at one point, your reach into the population is such that you have a kind of public square kind of responsibility, and so the reach of the platforms in terms of users is then so significant that amplification effects and other effects such as organization of the social media service become more important than issues of individual takedowns that are more dealt with trusted flaggers or notice and action mechanisms and so on. So now in this part here, we wanted to target, first of all, the risk itself. We have a threshold of these 45 million users where we consider that risks need to be assessed. In the impact assessment, we identify some 15-20 platforms that fall into this category. Of course, the real number will have to be determined once we are clear on the real user numbers that platforms have. In this category are very different services, and so we were relatively explicit in the impact assessment based on public data commercial data that was available. Approximate data, So, but they are the ones that you and I would most associate with potential kind of shaping structural influence over our online environment. Now, having said that, the platforms are quite different, and they cannot all be treated in the same way. And the risks that they pose and the measures that they can or should take are all quite different. So the logic of the risk assessment, risk mitigation system there was that to say, well, first of all, we basically designate these very large online platforms as platforms carrying potentially risk. We recognize that many platforms already carry out mitigating measures, whether it comes to how the spread of illegal content is limited, how they protect user rights, or how they prevent, for example, manipulation from coordinated manipulation of their services, which I think is also a relatively kind of recent phenomenon. I remember, everybody will remember the newspaper headlines, Mark Zuckerberg saying there was no interference in the US elections, and only to see later on really the kind of very substantial evidence that came to light in many reports and many investigations and so on, which it was really evidence of unintentional manipulative effects. Now platforms also, due to the code of practice, have started reporting such manipulations and working with us as well, and proactively looking forward for such things. So what we're basically saying is that these risk analysis and mitigation measures, they are put into a regulatory framework and then subject to regulatory supervision. We're not being prescriptive of exactly how they should be conducted. There's a fair amount of choice on how this risk assessment can be adjusted. It is also evolving. So over time, many of the platforms we are dealing with will change their features. Where YouTube is bothering me for signing up for the ad-free system at the moment, and I'm refusing. So just as an example, because clearly, there's just one example. There's a desire to reinvent or move business models into new spaces, and this is also perfectly fine. This is what we are not at all against it, but we are saying, well, as these things change and as the potential for manipulations change, as the potential for illegal content risk mitigation, and maybe also as the risks for fundamental rights change, we need to regularly to sit around together and assess them and to see whether there are any correctives needed. And this mechanism at the moment is missing. It's supplemented by data access and transparency reporting. I think many platforms, in my view, are already doing a big fraction of what is in the risk assessment today under the regular transparency reporting. Of course, we are pushing them a bit further. This is also our assignment, and the fact that it is subject to transparency, quite wide-ranging transparency obligations, but also regulatory oversight, is of course will require companies to make adjustments, because I'm sure, having worked in the private sector, compliance people will now become more involved in these. The legal departments will become more involved, because companies have a stronger regulatory incentive now to get these things right. But this is also exactly what the intention was of the proposal, that these need to be serious and public and disclosures. And while we're not in the business of telling companies how to micromanage, we don't want to micromanage their systems. This is their job, but we want to be able to have a conversation about whether we see the same risks, whether we have different or the same views on whether the mitigating measures are effective, and also involve other actors such as civil society and academics as part of this conversation. This is not a closed shop discussion. The public will have its own views, and therefore the design of this risk assessment is thought out in this way. We have some specific provisions on amplification of content there, but by and large, it's designed that you are in breach of the obligations only if you're really in bad faith. This is also a regulatory logic in this thing. So it's really, and coming back to what Helene said earlier, if you are really a rogue actor and you don't want to do this, then the system is designed to crack down very hard on you. If you are a good faith actor, and we can sit around the table and make discussions, we will nudge good faith actors into where we believe they must go. Also, not again exclusively with the regulator, but also with cooperation with civil society and with the public disclosure as well. But this is basically the logic of the risk assessment article in a nutshell. Sorry if I was a bit longer, big nutshell. So.
Well, these were very, I think, needed explanations. So thank you so much for taking the time. Before we move to the Q&A session to get the views of the public, I was wondering if maybe Marco and Helen, you could very quickly react to what Prabat just exposed. And when I say really quickly, I really need to stress on this because unfortunately my job is also to be the timekeeper here. And I would like to save enough time for the Q&A session. So please, Helen, you go first.
Okay, I will try to do my best. Yeah, well, we're much in favor of the approach Prabat just told us all. If you look at the risk mitigation for the very large online platforms, it's an area where we need to think broader than just content removal. Online, there are 3 vectors to deserve attention. There's actors, content, and behavior. And starting with the actors, they can purposely misuse online services to reach their goals. Measures like searching for fake accounts can raise the barrier for malicious actors. When looking at content, we need to look beyond removal, especially for harmful content that is not illegal. Other possible measures are demoting content or placing transparency and fact-check labels. And finally, we must not forget the behavioral aspects. People's behavior can be influenced by the choice architecture of online platforms. And the rules in the DSA about advertising, transparency, and recommender systems are a welcoming addition in this respect. So we therefore endorse the Commission's approach to mitigations measures, and that's regulating context over content.
Thank you. Marco, if you please.
Sure. Thank you, Alexandra. A couple of points from me. First, I want to restate that I'm feeling encouraged by the explanation from Prabat, but I want to stress that the risk for moving away from the legal content to the legal but harmful in the context of the mitigation risk and how these in the arms of in the arms of the public debate outside sometimes of the rule of law could become just in the conversation between regulators and platforms very dangerous area, I would say, for our democracies, if not put under the right level of safeguards. Second point that I would really like to stress also in relation to what Ellen and Prabat said on the importance of looking beyond the removals. I think we have done some progress as a platform in this regard. First of all, it's in our business priority to make sure that users are exposed to positive content on our platform, because this is what our advertisers and our users want. In order to measure that, we recently launched a new metric on YouTube, on the YouTube Transparency Report, known as the violative view rate. This metric is an estimate of the proportion of video views that violate our community guidelines in a given quarter. So gives the qualitative dimension in addition to the quantitative dimension in terms of removal. It's very interesting, and it says, for example, that as per today, every 10,000 views on YouTube, 18 comes from violative content. But especially says that from when we started to track this number, so Q4 2017 to today, we have seen a 70% drop in this number, in this metric, thanks to the initiative that we have done to raise up qualitative content and lower down the visibility of harmful content.
Thank you. That was extremely clear. I would like to now open the floor for questions because I think I've talked too much, and I'd be really interested in hearing what the public would have to say. So please drop your questions in the chat. Please also try to mention to whom you are asking the question, because that will make my job much easier. And ideally, state your name and affiliation. Okay, so I see that we might have a few people that are a bit shy to ask the first question. Can sometimes be a bit impressive, but I know that Malcolm Hattie must have a question for a panelist. So please, Malcolm, if you would like to jump in and kickstart this Q&A session. Malcolm just dropped a written question for me, so I'm going to read it. When it comes to KYBC, certain policymakers think that this is not enough and would like to create additional specific obligations for marketplaces. So I would like to know what your views are on that. Maybe Helen?
Sorry, can you just, because I didn't hear the beginning of your phrase. Sorry.
Oh, it was on KYBC. I know that some policymakers think that the proposal does not go far enough, and there are suggestions to create new specific obligations for marketplaces. So I would like to know if you share this view, and if so, like in which direction you would like to go.
Yeah, well, especially what interests us is how the relationship will be between the Digital Services Act, so the Know Your Business Customer obligation in the Digital Services Act, and other existing or upcoming EU vertical legislation, like the Omnibus Directive, and also the revision of the General Product Safety Directive. And that's what will interest us. Where will all the responsibilities have a place? I think that's one of the for us interesting things to see. And as I already stated in the beginning, of course, it really comes to the DSA. If you look at the transparency obligations, I already touched upon that one. Let me see, and also I think already Brabat told something about the discussions on what constitutes a trader in Article 22. I don't know if it's an answer to the question, because it's quite a wide question, so I try to make it more precise.
Well, from my end, I understood everything you said, and it was very clear. So thank you so much. I have a question from the chat from Emina Ikanovic, who is asking us how the safeguards will work, and a specific question: who are the experts that, for instance, remove and correct COVID-19 disinformation? So I guess, Marco, this is something that you've had to deal with quite often in the past few months. So maybe you can tell us a bit more about what you did.
Thank you, Alexandra. It's a very good question. If we really follow what happened in relation to COVID-19, we have a good example on the way we deal with the policy and how we, as a platform, update our policies. When we started to look at COVID-19 disinformation, in March, we based our activity on our existing policies, which were, of course, not allowing on our platform any statement that was in contradiction with the scientific consensus on a given issue. But as you remember, at the beginning of the pandemic, there was not really such a thing. So it developed over time, and only a specific time we were able to point out to the clear guidelines coming from the WHO, from the health authorities, which helped us to inform our policies, so adapt our policies from a general statement in contradiction to the health authorities' statement to the very specific ones, including how the new ones that were put on the table. Like, for example, who of us could imagine that at some point somebody could make a connection between the 5G conspiracy theories and the COVID-19 conspiracy theories? And we had to adapt our policies also to this specific issue, but we had always to take as a point of reference, so who is deciding, the consensus from the scientific community, in order to anchor our policies to some objective element. Through the process, we also arrived recently in October, when the vaccination process started in vaccination, the statement around vaccination to our policies, whenever these statements are contradicting, once again, the scientific consensus coming from WHO and health authorities on this topic. So across all this process, we adapted basically four times, so if we count the 5G incident, our policies to how the situation was developing, but we always had as North Star the position, the statement, the guidelines coming from experts and health authorities. I really wanted to open quickly a parenthesis on this one. We always discuss about algorithm and about machine moderating content, and I think, like, looking at this from a platform perspective, this is so far from the reality. If machine learning tools and algorithms are working, are because are informed well by the human factor, the content that is reviewed by our colleagues, the expert advice on a specific and given topic, the health authorities' position in the context of COVID. If you input machine learning tools and algorithm with this kind of information, then you can be pretty sure that machine learning tools will do a good job in identifying violative content. That's why, if you look at the numbers coming from the transparency report recently, just to give you an idea of the vast majority of the content that we took down because it was flagged by our machine, and in the vast majority of the case, it's with very few views.
Thank you. I have another question that is directed at Marco and Prabhat. So I think I'm going to divide it in two. It comes from Rachel Tan from the University of Waikato in New Zealand. So the first half of the question is, how do we appoint trusted flaggers? Can you illustrate how one is appointed? And what is your take on community guidelines? And to you, Prabhat, I would like to ask the question, do you think they are sufficient to combating illegal content, especially hate speech? So maybe, Marco, you start, and then Prabhat, you take the floor.
Of course. So how we appoint the trusted flaggers? In the vast majority of the case, we are contacted by experts, NGOs, in some cases also government organizations, institutions that come to us bringing their expertise and highlighting a specific issue, or their availability to help us on working on a specific issue. We, of course, verify the knowledge, and we exchange information, and so we learn from each other. Once we reach a good joint knowledge from our side of their expertise, from their side, on the way our content referral mechanism works, then we grant them the access to the tool. It's a very effective and straightforward tool, which allows the trusted flagger as every user, so it's always the same platform we are talking about, to report to us content. The only thing that is changes is in the background, the fact that we give the right level of priority to the flags that we are receiving from the trusted flagger. So it's all human driven, and it's all made on collaboration and let's say introduction from, or request of be part of the process by third parties and experts.
Thanks. Pravet, maybe you want to jump in on how do you think, do you think if there is sufficient to combating illegal content, especially hate speech?
Yes, Alexandra, I think that there are a couple of points here. I mean, first of all, what Marco mentioned is the current practice at YouTube, which is a voluntary practice, and it is sometimes framed in the codes of conduct at the EU level, but I know that YouTube started working with trusted flaggers well before any hate speech code of conduct started in other jurisdictions. This was a well-established practice done in the Digital Services Act. We changed the system, of course, a little bit into a regulatory system. So first of all, there needs to be some kind of appointment of trusted flagger system, which we have entrusted to the Digital Services Coordinator, so the regulatory structure as well. And then there's a mechanism also, of course, by losing the privileges, because I mean, becoming a trusted flagger is a very significant privilege, because it basically you have fast-track access to the company's content moderation system, and so it's open to abuse and as well. So there are some parameters, there's some limits there that we have to keep in mind as well on this. So I think this is something that and there are some safeguards as well if there are indications that this status is abused or not. So that's also one important element that we have to put in. And I think this is partly also an answer to the other question in the chat, which I see at the same time. You know, we've also included provisions, you know, when it becomes, for example, apparent to third parties that this system is abused, that they can make changes to it. You know? So I'm sorry, I have. Is it sufficient? Maybe just a quick thing. I mean, I think, you know, this is an easy question because it's not going to be sufficient, because the problem of illegal content and illegal hate speech is also a problem of society. I mean, let's be clear. You know, that we are regulating intermediaries here, but there are origins of this problem in society, and they are not within reach of several of our things, you know. And so I think we can do things in the DSA to limit the spread of illegal content online, to persecute the perpetrators, you know, to hold them to account, to make sure that platforms have effective systems in place to quickly identify and remove them. But making the problem of hate speech go away requires the problem of hatred to go away in society, you know, and I think we've got a long way to go there. But we can certainly contribute to making a safer, more regulated online environment available. But there are some things that we cannot reach through intermediary regulation. You know?
Absolutely. I have another question to you, Pravet. So since you mentioned this question comes to us from Thomas Bielmeier from ECHO, the German Association of Internet Services Providers. And since you mentioned the good work of hotlines and the partial funding by the EU Commission, I was wondering, also from the point of view of ECHO's hotline, what the Commission hasn't focused on the work and financing of hotlines, but introduced a national system where member states are able to give a stamp of approval. And if the Commission, but also the member states, don't see the risk of diverging level of nominated trusted flaggers and the issues of having too many trusted flaggers and the notifications becoming needle in the haystack. So maybe, Prabhat, you can give us your first insight, and then Helen for the member states' point of view.
I mean, certainly flanking measures and support measures are not excluded in order to make. So we've been focusing on the regulatory system itself. I've already mentioned that codes of conduct and you know, guidelines and recommendations are all possible. I think we are supporting some hotlines, maybe not all types of hotlines. I think it will also be an interesting conversation to have with industry itself. How this is not part of the proposal, but this is certainly something of the flanking measures. How can we? What other accompanying measures? You know, and quite frankly, I've seen you know, since we have started working on this, also a lot of change in industry. You know, I mean, we have now seen a much more active involvement of the companies to fund institutions such as the GIFCT, you know, the Global Internet for Countering Terrorism, the Christchurch Call, which just had its anniversary. You know, they have been supported by a coalition of people who are willing to solve this problem, but also financially been supported by companies. I think we should recognize, and I think that this is a model that we should continue to pursue. I mean, in the area of child sexual abuse material, of course, there's a special criminal type of content where the public interest is entirely different. Other types of content, you know, have their own challenges, but I think that it's not necessarily excluded. Second question is on diverging levels of trusted flaggers, where this is a concern for us. I mean, certainly, as I say, it really is. It should be treated as a privilege. And I think it's also something that Helen, I think we all agree that we don't want the system to break because you have a rogue trusted flagger who is flagging all sorts of you know, perfectly legitimate content, and so we have put in some defense mechanisms there into the DSA and some safeguards. Platforms can defend themselves. Civil society organizations can defend themselves. Regulators can defend the system as well. I mean, can it be made stronger even? You know, maybe worth reflecting. I mean, we're not opposed to the principle and the objective, but it is a privilege, and it needs to be handled as such, I think.
Alexander, if I can add just a word. Of course, I didn't mention, but every flag that is coming from the trusted flagger is reviewed by our team as much as any flag that we are receiving with the same level of attention. And if we are experiencing any abuse of the system from the trusted flagger, this is resulting in the removal of the privilege. So from this point of view, the proposal of the Commission, including also the very important clarification that the flags from trusted flagger should not be by default lead to an action, removal action, it's very welcome, and we share the same concern and perspective.
Yeah, maybe in addition to Prabhat and Marco, what is absolutely important is robust criteria that ensure the independence of the trusted flaggers. Because of course we have concern, that's also the ongoing discussion around the let's say the uncontrolled proliferation of trusted flaggers and subsequent over removal of content. So those robust criteria are really very important in this respect.
Thank you. Prabhat, you wanted to add something? I see you unmuted your mic.
Sorry, maybe I just jumped in. I wanted to answer the question on the on who bears the responsibility on the unjustifiable removal of content that's in the chat. If it's okay with you, Alexandra, I can quickly. You know, in the way that the DSA is structured, is that that such an unjustified removal will trigger a counter notice procedure and a complaint mechanism, and so through a statement of reasons. So there's a statement of reason, and then that statement of reasons can be the basis for either an internal complaint or an external complaint to the platform. If the platform erroneously removed it, I mean, it bears the burden of the corrective action. So I think that's basically the architecture of the DSA. So in the proposed regulation, users have a completely new set of avenues to contest the decision making. And here, maybe YouTube is not the best example, because I think these are also already practices that have already been in place in YouTube for a long time, notably under DMCA. I think a counter notice mechanism was first implemented amongst, I think YouTube was an early platform to adopt a counter notice mechanism to dispute. But outside of, I mean, there are many other platforms in which such removal decisions cannot be contested at the moment. You know, I mean, we receive phone calls. It might make you laugh, but you know, can I get some can you put me in touch with someone in Silicon Valley because my content got removed? I have no avenue of getting it back back online. And with the DSA, users will get new powers to do so. But the responsibility for unjustified removals, either under terms of service or under illegalities, you know, will lie primarily with the platforms.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions in the chat, and unfortunately my clock is ticking. Oh, thank you all for this very interesting conversation. And I would like to give each and every one of you 30 to 45 seconds for your concluding remarks. I'm really sorry I can't make it any longer, because I could sit here and listen to you all day, but unfortunately, we all know that we have meetings after meetings after meetings. I'm sure a lot of attendees are going to have to leave us. So Helen, if you would like to start concluding this segment.
Thank you very much. I just want to thank you and Malcolm and Alexandra for having this this panel today. It's crucial legislative proposals that we're discussing today. It's crucial for the trust we have in the digital services, and it's very important to keep all stakeholders involved. So if there are any stakeholders in today tuning in, please do reach out to us to further discuss and feed us in this, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Marco?
I would like to thanks again EuroISPA for organizing this great meeting, and it was a pleasure to be with such important co-panelists today. And I would like to close talking about indeed of the appeal mechanism. We as a platform have the responsibility to put in place a very robust appeal mechanism in order to make sure that whenever a user has a complaint in relation to content that was taken down, can come back to us. Just to give you a number, in Q4 2020, we creators appealed over 223,000 of times, and in 83,000 of times we reinstated the content. And we have people reviewing all these appeals and making sure that we do our best to make the right decision. So this is key for us. And like to close, to not show that we always agree with the Commission in relation to that, of course, we welcome the encouragement to do better in appeal mechanism, to make sure that we have the right stronger redress mechanism in place, but we are a bit concerned about outsourcing this to third parties.
Thank you. Pravet, if you may. Pravet, you are on mute. Thank you.
Sorry, my machine is suddenly slow, so I'm clicking
We heard you for a second and then you went back to mute. You are still on mute, Pravet. Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Sorry.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's my this is the time of the day when my machine tells me that I should stop, and because it slows down, so I keep clicking faster than it responds. So just a big thank you from my side as well. I mean, these are very enriching conversations, and I'm sorry we didn't have more time for the Q&A. And I think, as you say yourself, we could have continued for a long period of time to discuss the details. I think that you know, I'm encouraged by the initial very positive response from many parts of the spectrum. I think we are off to a very good start, and I myself look forward to maintaining the momentum, also in the co-legislation now, and I'm quite optimistic that we can find an agreement on many of the issues can be resolved, I think, through some clarification. So I'm cautiously optimistic for bringing kind of an upgraded regulatory framework for digital services to the European Union in the time that European citizens expect us to do it, and certainly before my teenagers grow up and stop using these services, so they can still benefit from safety online.
Thank you. Malcolm, do you want to say a few last words?
I'd really just like to thank the panel for being here and giving us such an interesting and insightful and learned analysis of the proposal and the issues that we've discussed today. I've certainly benefited from it enormously. I very much hope that all our guests have done so too. I think these workshop sessions where we get this detailed analysis really adds something to the discussion here, and of course it all depends upon the excellence of the speakers, and we haven't been let down today. They've done a marvelous job, so thank you very much to them. Thank you also to yourself, Alexandra, for doing such a wonderful job of chairing, and I must say I'm very much looking forward to the next workshop on the next topic. Perhaps you could remind us all which topics we're going to focus on.
Thank you, Malcolm, for your kind words. We will be focusing on reporting obligations and transparency. Our next meeting is going to be early June. We will reach out to you by emails with invitations, so please make sure that you attend. And it's really hard to go after Malcolm in thanking people because Malcolm always does such a good job. But thank you. It's been a pleasure hosting this conversation, and thanks to Malcolm and Links, we could make this possible through the sponsorship. I would like also to thank the EuroISPA Secretariat for putting this all together, reaching out to everyone individually, and make sure that we have a great attendance. So you'll find a recap of this event on the website. It's recording, and I will see you all in June for our next event. So until then, stay safe, and I wish you a lovely afternoon. Goodbye.